Hey, what's up everybody? Chris here, and I wanted to make a video today to talk about my experience going from an ICE car, internal combustion engine, to an electric vehicle. So in September of this year, it was Labor Day actually, I picked up a Tesla Model 3. So not a long range version, just the standard, honestly, like base version you can get of a Model 3. And I'd done a lot of research on it. I have two really close friends who have Model 3s of different varieties, and I had driven one of them actually in Washington State when I went out to visit him, and I really liked it a lot. And I had been thinking about trying to convert to an EV for a long time. So the question eventually became, is it worth it? Am I going to regret doing that? What is that transition like? And so I wanted to just talk about that kind of briefly today, because I have had a lot of family and friends who just have a lot of questions about it, right? Most people I know are still drive combustion engine cars, understandably, right? I mean, it's really what people are used to. The infrastructure is there for it. So the questions inevitably have to do with things like range anxiety, which I had some concerns about that before I had an opportunity to kind of test drive one graciously through my friend who lives in the Seattle area to see what that's like. And so, I thought I would just talk about that a little bit and kind of let you know what my experience is like. So I live in North Carolina. Again, I've mentioned this in some of my other videos, but a relatively large city, Charlotte. So, in terms of the range anxiety piece, that was something that the more research I did really kind of dwindled. And my biggest question really had to do with actually going to visit some of my family who lives in the eastern part of the state, about 4.5, maybe 5 hours away, depending on, sort of the route I take. And as it turns out, it really is not a big deal at all. Even with this base model, Model 3, I've got about, they advertise 272 miles of range or something like that, but obviously that's really kind of dependent on how you're driving the car. I would say realistically more like 260, again, it just kind of depends on how you're handling things, how fast you're going, all that kind of stuff. But for me to go from where I live toward the coast of North Carolina, I really only have to stop one time to charge. And so then there are questions about, well, what is that process like? How long does it take? Is it like gassing up a car and going? And it is not that fast, right? It does not take just 3 or 4 minutes to get the car charged up. But that also kind of depends on how much you want to charge it. And so what the recommendation typically is that you're going to put in really the percentage you need to get to your destination and then to recharge there, right? And there's another caveat that sort of comes along with that piece of it too. But for me, I usually stop and charge for about 20-25 minutes. It just kind of depends on how low my battery is, that sort of thing. And one thing you learn once you get into this as sort of a routine is that there are different speeds of superchargers. Now, there are plenty of these throughout North Carolina, right? There's several in the Charlotte area. There's actually not one far from my house, which I never have to use that really because I'm always charging at home, which I'll talk about that here momentarily as well. But for me, I stop usually in the Raleigh, Chapel Hill area to charge up for about 20-25 minutes. And it's always been kind of a nice thing because usually what I've found is that the superchargers are next to things like a Starbucks or a Target. So it kind of gives you a chance to get out, stretch your legs, get some coffee, do whatever it may be that you need to do. The one time that I've had a challenge with this was I was going to visit my mom and dad. I had my youngest son with me, stopped in Chapel Hill or near there to charge up, and a thunderstorm rolled in and it just poured and poured, and I did not have an umbrella. And what you'll learn if you get into this is that most superchargers don't have any kind of awning or covering. So I got soaked through the process of charging, which I knew was going to happen when it started raining, and I sort of learned a lesson there. Always keep an umbrella in your car, which I should do anyway. I'm really bad about that. But beyond that, the convenience of it really is not a bad thing. And honestly, people might say this is kind of mental gymnastics to justify that it takes a little bit longer to charge your car, but the fact that you have to get out and walk around and kind of, get going a little bit, get some coffee, whatever it might be, as I mentioned earlier, it kind of, I think is a safer route than just gassing up and just sort of pushing your way through a long drive, which there's something to be said for that, but I've kind of come to appreciate that when I'm on a longer trip. But the reality is I hardly ever go to superchargers. I paid $550 to have, gosh, I can't remember what type it is. I want to say it's like what was the name of that outlet? The dryer outlet type of plug put in my garage by an electrician here. I priced it out with a few different electricians. One was going to charge as low as $200, which, to that guy's credit, he was trying to do me a favor with that, but I think it was going to be more off the books type of a more off the books type of install, which probably would not have been great. One guy was quoting me at $900, which just seemed outrageous, but I guess that's not too out of line. But $550 is where I landed. I found a guy I felt really good about. He pulled all the necessary paperwork with the county that I live in. They came out and did an inspection and signed off on it. So it's super easy. For me, I've got a commute to work that takes me about 35 minutes or so. This past semester, I'm an English teacher at a local college here. I was having to go in every day. And so I would say that I would charge my car to 100% on Sunday, and then by Tuesday night or maybe Wednesday morning, depending on how I was driving, I'd have to recharge it, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of different theories about how you should charge it, and I did some research on that too, took to Reddit, other places. I have the type of battery, lithium ion phosphate, where they are okay with you, or they recommend that at least once a week you charge it to 100% for the sake of range projection, accuracy, that kind of stuff. But I would say every now and then I top it off to like 80–85% is fine. Never really had any issues at all with that. And the convenience of charging at home is just massively awesome. Like, I can't overstate how good it is to be able to just pull into your garage, plug in the car, and you're good to go, right? And it really just takes a few hours to get it to, you know, if it's especially low, it's going to take longer than that to get it to a good percentage. But, you know, if I came home and I had 30% battery, it might take 4 to 5 hours to get it to 100%, but in a couple of hours, you're at, you know, 50–60%, whatever it might be. Now, if you were just charging on a 120 volt wall charger, a standard wall charger, it would take a long time. In fact, coming back to what I was saying earlier about visiting my parents, they do not have a 245 volt outlet, which is what I had installed in my garage. In their garage, they let me park my car in there. I plugged it in over the course of the weekend, and I think when I got to their house, I had 30-something%. I had stopped to see a friend in Raleigh, actually another Model 3 owner, stopped to see a friend in Raleigh, and when I got there, I had about 30-something%. I was staying from Friday night through Sunday morning. I was taking my mom to a football game. We're both alums of the same university. And by the time I left the next day, I was basically back at 100%. So again, it's a much more kind of slow trickle type of charge with a 120 volt wall outlet. So if you're going to get into this, I would say at a minimum, do that. Now, you could also purchase the wall charger that's installed. What I ended up doing was putting in that outlet that I referred to earlier and got the mobile connector, so that way I can just, you know, get that. I can take it with me when I need to go places, that kind of stuff. And the mobile, this is one of the more ridiculous things about buying this car, in my opinion. The fact that it doesn't come with the charger is massively stupid. You have to pay for it, and I think the charger itself was $200, something like that. But, you know, I mean, when you sort of roll that into the cost of, okay, what would I be paying in gas and all that kind of stuff, it sort of shakes out in the end. But the reason I wanted to get this car, there were a couple of reasons. One was environmental impact. I kind of knew that the next car that I picked up would probably be either hybrid or electric. I went with this car specifically because I love the idea of zero emissions. Now, you could make the argument that, you know, the production of the battery, the production of the car itself does result in some kind of fossil fuel emissions, that sort of stuff. But of course, over the longevity of the car, and I'm planning to keep this for a long time, barring something unforeseen, you know, that of course goes away really as a consideration, and it's just a clean car to have. It's good for the environment, and that is something that's important to me. You know, I mean, I don't want to go down sort of a political route here, but I think that the future of transportation is electric, and so I wanted to sort of get into that. The other thing that I mentioned earlier that really spurred me on to get a Model 3 and a Tesla, and just an EV in general, had to do with convenience. Again, being able to pull into your garage, plug your car in, you're good to go. Like, it's just amazing. Like, now I hate going to the gas station. My previous car before this was a 2008 Honda Civic. I still have it. I'm looking at it right now. It's parked in our garage. I'm trying to keep it going long enough that my son, who's currently 13, when he turns 16, if he wants it, he can have it. That car's got 192,000 miles on it. It still runs like a champ. But the other thing that spurred me on to get this was my commute involves a pretty busy interstate with a lot of 18-wheelers in traffic. And the Civic, though it's a great car, if it were to be in a wreck, like a serious wreck, it would not fare well, right? And so there's just a lot more safety features on this car that makes me feel good about having the children in here, that kind of stuff, when I'm shuttling them around as well, to and from school, basketball, that kind of stuff. So the safety piece of it was another sort of factor that works into it. But, you know, the reason I'm recording this, I think holistically, is just to give people a sense of, you know, are EVs worth it? And is it really that jarring of a leap from a gas car? And I would say that the answer is, in some ways, yes, initially. But once you get used to all the conveniences of it, it's just incredible, right? And I'm not making this video to advocate for Tesla specifically. Again, not to go down a political rabbit hole, but I have a lot of issues with Elon Musk. I mean, I love a lot of what he's done for technology, but politically, he's got a lot of issues to work through. But when I think about the many benefits of this car specifically that it offers for me and for the environment, like, that makes it worth it. But again, the reason I'm making this really mostly is to just, you know, if people have questions about EVs and whether or not it's a doable thing, it is, right? I mean, obviously you want to do your research, you want to figure out what it's going to take to make it a convenient and manageable prospect for you. But for me, it's been an amazing transition. I have really loved it. Besides, the whole fact of sometimes you have to do a supercharger, which is rare for me. It's only on longer trips, obviously. And sometimes you have to deal with weather a little bit with that. The other thing that I think could use a little bit of improvement is the delivery process. You do it all through your app if you're buying a brand new Tesla specifically. If it's a different type of car, I think it's probably more in line with a typical car purchasing experience where you go to a dealership and all that. This, you purchase it exclusively through the app. You do everything through that. It can be a little bit confusing, right? Because, you can go to your bank and get a loan that way if you're not going to pay for it outright. I did everything through Tesla and their lender in the way that I did it. I put my down payment down and all of that. The thing that was a little bit annoying about it through the process is you think you're done with it. You've done all the necessary steps, but then they're like, oh, actually, now you owe us $1,800. And what it is the sales tax, depending on the state you're in. It's not rolled into the loan that you're getting, so you have to pay for that out of pocket. And so I messaged with the rep that I was working with, and they kind of explained it to me. So I paid that, went and picked it up. And it's been a really easy, straightforward process since then. I would say, though, when I picked up the car, they did not spend much time going over all the sort of ins and outs and sort of the features with me. I knew most of it because, again, I've driven one before. I've got a couple of friends who have one, have this car specifically in different versions of it. But I do think in the Charlotte area, if you're getting one, just be prepared that my delivery experience was fine. I was only in the dealership for like 45 minutes to get it, sign my final paperwork, and leave. But they didn't take much time to go through stuff. So what I would say is come with a worksheet with a bunch of questions. Obviously, I checked for things like panel gaps. I made sure the car was clean all around, all of that kind of stuff, and it's been totally fine. But just be aware of that. I think it depends on where you live with the actual delivery experience and how that goes. But what I would say again is it doesn't have to be a Tesla specifically. I think EVs are the future. I think the convenience of it's amazing. There are a lot of great options out there. There were some other ones that I considered, but for me, it kind of came down to the charging network, honestly, was sort of the big thing. And there are just some great features with the car that I appreciate. But anyway, if you've had any kind of curiosities about an electric vehicle, I just wanted to offer my thoughts. If you've got a Tesla, let me know what your experience has been like, or any other EV, right? Maybe an Ioniq or something else. Let me know what you think about it. But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and I'll check back in soon.